There is a moment every fruit tree grower remembers. You plant one tree, just one. You tell yourself that's plenty, that your yard is small, that you're a reasonable person with reasonable limits. And then, 18 months later, you're standing in your driveway, arguing with a delivery driver about where to put your 11th tree, and somewhere deep down, you already know you're never getting your yard back. Today, I'm going to walk you through 3 fruit trees that are almost scientifically engineered to turn a casual gardener into a full-blown collector, plus one bonus tree at the very end that might be the most dangerous of them all. Stick around, because the third one on this list can be grown in climates that most people assume are far too cold, and I'll show you exactly how. Let's start with the gateway fruit, the one that gets almost everybody hooked first. The fig tree. Here's the thing about figs that nobody tells you when you're standing in the nursery looking at some sad little stick in a pot. Figs are one of the fastest fruiting trees on the planet. Most fruit trees make you wait 2 to 3 years after planting a grafted tree just to see your first real harvest. Some trees grown from seed can take the better part of a decade. Figs don't play by those rules. You can take a dormant cutting in late winter, root it in nothing more than moist potting mix, and within about 3 months, you have a young tree ready to go in the ground. Get that tree into the soil in early spring, and there is a very real chance you're eating fruit off it by late summer of that same year. That is an almost unheard of turnaround time in the world of fruit trees, and it is exactly why figs are so addictive to collect. The feedback loop is instant, so your brain starts craving the next variety before the first one has even finished producing. And then there's the flavor diversity, which is where things really spiral out of control. Fig varieties don't just vary a little bit in taste. They taste like completely different fruits depending on which one you're growing. Some varieties taste like they've been dipped in honey. Others taste like strawberry jam that somehow grew on a tree. Some have notes of brown sugar. Others taste almost like dark berries mixed with maple syrup. Once you've tasted 3 or 4 wildly different figs off 3 or 4 different trees, the idea of stopping at just one variety starts to feel almost absurd. Why would you limit yourself to a single flavor when there are literally hundreds of named fig varieties out there, each with its own personality? On top of that, figs are ridiculously easy to grow. They shrug off most insect pests. They rarely get serious disease, and they produce fruit at essentially every leaf node along the branch, which means even a modestly sized tree can be loaded with fruit. They'll grow reliably in the ground in a wide range of climates, and if your winters are too harsh, you can grow them in large containers and simply bring them into an unheated garage or basement for the coldest months. Low effort, fast payoff, huge variety. That combination is basically a formula for turning one fig tree into a dozen. There's also a timing trick that serious fig collectors lean on once they catch the bug. Fig varieties ripen across a staggered window rather than all at once. So by choosing a mix of early, mid, and late season types, you can stretch a single crop of fig trees into 4 or 5 months of continuous harvest. Plant an early ripening variety alongside a couple of mid-season types and something that hangs on late into fall. And suddenly, you're not eating one big burst of figs in August. You're picking fresh fruit steadily from early summer all the way through the first frosts. That staggered harvest is part of what makes the collecting mindset so easy to fall into, because every new variety you add doesn't just add flavor, it adds weeks to your season. Now, before we move to fruit tree number 2, I want you to do something for me. If you already have a favorite fruit tree you're obsessed with, drop it in the comments right now, because I'm genuinely curious how many of you are already further down this rabbit hole than you're willing to admit. All right, let's keep going, because fruit tree number 2 might just be the single most rewarding tree you can plant in your entire yard. Fruit tree number 2 is the persimmon, and if figs are the gateway, persimmons are the fruit that convinces people to build an entire second orchard just to house them. Persimmons come in a few different flavors of complicated, and understanding the categories is what unlocks the addiction. There are Asian persimmons, which split further into astringent and non-astringent types. There are American persimmons, which are all astringent and remarkably cold-hardy. And there are hybrid crosses that try to combine the size and mild flavor of the Asian type with the toughness of the American type. Non-astringent Asian persimmons are the easy entry point. You can eat them firm, almost like biting into an apple, straight off the tree, no waiting required. Astringent types are a completely different experience. Eat one before it's fully ripe and your mouth will feel like it's coated in chalk. But let that same fruit soften until it's practically jelly, and you get what might genuinely be one of the most delicious fruits that exists. Rich, spiced, almost like a spoonful of honey and cinnamon wrapped in fruit form. What makes persimmons so collectible is how differently each type behaves and how that behavior maps onto the calendar. Non-astringent types can be picked firm and stored in a cool, dark spot for weeks, letting you stagger your harvest instead of eating everything at once. Astringent types are often at their absolute best after the first hard frosts of the season, meaning persimmons can extend your harvest calendar well past the point where most of your garden has already shut down for the year. Some growers are still picking fruit off certain persimmon varieties right around the holidays. That's an enormous window of productivity from a single type of tree, and once you realize you can chase that harvest window across half the year just by planting different varieties, you start understanding why so many gardeners end up with 3, 4, 5 persimmon trees instead of the one they originally planned on. They're also remarkably low maintenance. Persimmons deal with very few insect pests and rarely need spraying for disease, which means your biggest enemy is usually wildlife trying to steal the harvest before you do, not the tree itself struggling to survive. Combine that ease of care with wildly different flavor experiences depending on variety, and you've got another perfect storm for accidental overcollecting. And persimmons don't just reward you at the moment you pick them. They reward you in the kitchen for weeks afterward. A soft, fully ripe persimmon can go straight into bread or cake in place of banana, blended into yogurt for a breakfast that tastes like dessert, churned into sorbet, or simmered down into jam. Some growers even slice and dry astringent varieties, using a technique borrowed from traditional Japanese preservation methods, turning what would otherwise be a short window of ripeness into a pantry staple that lasts through the winter. Once you realize a single tree can feed you fresh fruit for months, and then feed you again through everything you preserve, it stops feeling like one tree is ever going to be enough. All right, fruit tree number 3 is the one that surprises people the most, because most gardeners write it off before they even try. Citrus. The assumption most people make is that citrus only grows in Florida, Southern California, or somewhere tropical, and if you live anywhere with a real winter, you should just forget about it. That assumption is wrong, and it's costing a lot of gardeners one of the most rewarding collecting experiences available. Cold, hardy citrus varieties exist, and with the right rootstock and a little bit of seasonal protection, citrus can be grown successfully in climates that regularly drop well below freezing. The trick starts with rootstock. Citrus grafted onto cold-tolerant rootstocks like trifoliate orange varieties gain a meaningful boost in cold hardiness, while also staying naturally compact, which makes them far easier to protect during a cold snap. From there, growers use a handful of simple, almost old-fashioned techniques to buy extra degrees of protection. Large, dark-colored water containers placed near the trees absorb heat during the day and slowly radiate it back out overnight, acting like a thermal battery. Old-fashioned incandescent string lights, the kind that actually give off real heat instead of the cool LED versions, can be wrapped around a trunk to add several more degrees of protection on the coldest nights. Wrap the whole tree in a breathable frost cover during a hard freeze, and you can stack all of that protection together to buy yourself 10 to 15 degrees of extra hardiness compared to an unprotected tree. With that system in place, gardeners in climates that experience dozens of frosts every single winter are successfully growing satsumas, cold, hardy orange varieties, kumquats, lemons, limes, and their countless natural hybrids right in the ground. And that hybrid potential is a huge part of the addiction, because different citrus types cross-pollinate naturally, which has produced an enormous range of in-between fruits, part lemon, part orange, part lime, part kumquat, each with a slightly different flavor and a slightly different personality. Once you understand that citrus isn't reserved for warm climates, and once you taste a homegrown satsuma or a cold hardy lemon fresh off your own tree, going back to store-bought citrus starts to feel like a downgrade you're no longer willing to accept. There's also a strategic side to cold hardy citrus collecting that scratches a very particular itch for anyone who likes solving a puzzle. Placement matters just as much as variety. A tree planted against the south-facing wall of a house sits inside a natural microclimate, soaking up radiated heat from the wall all night long, which alone can be worth several extra degrees of protection before you even add a water barrel or string lights. That means the exact same variety can survive in one corner of your yard and struggle just 20 feet away in a more exposed spot. Once collectors start mapping out these microclimates, citrus stops being a single tree in a single location and starts becoming a small, carefully engineered orchard tucked into every warm pocket the yard has to offer. So that's the core three: figs for instant gratification and flavor diversity, persimmons for an almost unbelievable harvest window that stretches deep into the cold season, and cold hardy citrus for proving that an entire category of fruit you assumed was off limits is actually well within reach. Together, these three trees can keep you harvesting something delicious from early summer all the way through the dead of winter, which is exactly why so many people who start with one tree end up building an entire collection around this trio. But before we wrap up, there's a fourth tree worth knowing about, one that flies almost completely under the radar and might be the strangest, most rewarding addiction of them all. It's called the pawpaw, and it happens to be North America's largest native edible fruit. Pawpaws grow wild across a huge stretch of the eastern half of the continent, yet almost nobody has tasted one. And there's a simple reason why. Once a pawpaw ripens and drops, it only stays good for a couple of days, which makes it essentially impossible to sell commercially. If you want to taste one, you basically have to grow it yourself. The tree is a genuine oddity too, a cold, hardy, temperate relative of tropical custard apple fruit, capable of surviving winters that would kill most tropical plants outright, yet producing a fruit that tastes like a blend of banana, mango, and pineapple, wrapped in a texture closer to custard or whipped cream than anything you'd expect from a tree growing in a backyard with real winters. It's a slow tree to mature, often taking several years before that first fruit shows up. But growers who've waited it out consistently describe that first bite as one of the most unexpected and memorable things they've ever eaten from their own yard. If figs, persimmons, and cold hardy citrus sound like something you want to dive into, the smartest move is to start with just one tree from each category this season, rather than trying to build the whole collection at once. Get a foothold with an easy fig variety. Add a non-astringent persimmon for an effortless introduction to that flavor, and pick one cold hardy citrus variety suited to your zone. From there, the addiction tends to take care of itself. Let me know in the comments which one of these four you're most tempted to plant first. And if you've already got a collection going, brag about it a little. I want to hear how deep you've fallen into this. If this video helped you see your yard a little differently, do me a favor and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one, where we're going to dig even deeper into extending your harvest season using some of these exact same trees. Thanks for watching,